we can kind of work around that.
I have an issue, Sabina.
Oh, do you? Well, should have addressed it last semester. All right, so I'll just wait a couple more seconds and then start. How are you doing tonight, Greg?
I'm doing well. It's been a long day.
Oh,
So.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I know with even with 159 right now, like it's been a long day in that. Yeah, all good things.
But yeah, overall, I'm happy to be here. I love supporting IEEE. So
Yeah, no, we're
thank you.
super excited. This semester is virtual, so a little weird, a little different. We kind of ended last semester virtually as well. It's just been kind of adjusting to that, but I think it's doing pretty well so far. We have, I mean, we keep everybody in the loop with everything, and we've got some pretty exciting plans, so we're excited.
That's exciting. Yeah, I get the IEEE emails periodically, so it's exciting just to see what the club is doing over the past couple of years. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's very cool that you're on our mailing list.
Email list, yeah.
Greg, are you a new professor, or have you been here for a while? Sorry, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am a new professor. I actually started teaching last semester, about 6 weeks into the semester. So there was a departure of a faculty member, and I had been asked to see if I were available to come teach a class, and my schedule worked out just the right timing that I was available. Okay. And for the particular class, it was one of my favorite classes, so I was like, I'm super excited to jump in on the opportunity. And above everything, I mean, I knew that departure of any faculty would be tumultuous for the students that are in the class, and I really want to support students. Even when I was a student at Sac State, I had a lot of pleasure helping other students in the classes. So it's just one of those things, right place, right time, and worked out. And then I was asked to come back this semester as well. So looks like I'll be back for a while, as long as they'll have me. So.
Well, if there's one thing that Sac State needs, is new professors. We've had an old guard of professors, and I think all of them are about to I feel like in one semester everyone's going to retire, and then we're just going to have.
I hope not.
That'd be really bad.
Yeah, that's one thing I have to say about Sac State is there are a lot of really passionate and experienced and knowledgeable professors. I mean, I'm a Sac State alumni. I went back for my engineering degree after a long hiatus and graduated in 2015. But when I went back, I was fortunate to really engage with a number of the professors, and I mean, it's a transformative experience, being able to learn from all their experience teaching, but also so many of them have had industry experience, which I think is something unique to Sac State compared to other universities where you don't have as many faculty that are purely teaching. Like, they have industry experience and insight and knowledge that they can share. So it's, for everyone currently at Sac State, I mean, you are lucky to have those professors. I'm very honored to be part of that, that group as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give like a quick brief introduction, and then I'm gonna hand it off to Kevin, who has prepared a couple of questions. And if anyone has questions in the chat, feel free to shoot them there. But hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today. For those of you who don't know who we are IEEE Sac State chapter. We're a technical organization on campus aimed to support our EEE, CPE, and CS majors. Our secretary, Ramya, will link our Discord in the beginning, at the very end of the meeting for those who want to learn more about us and what we do here at Sac State. We're very active on Discord. Today we have Greg Crist here. Some of you might know him as a professor, but what you might not know about him is that he is a software engineering manager at HPE Aruba. So we invited him here today to do a very casual Q&A with us, and we prepared a list of questions to ask him. But we will have some time at the end to take questions from the audience. So please feel free to post them in the chat, and I'll make sure to get to them at the end. Other than that, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us here today. And I'll go ahead and let Kevin take it from here.
Yeah, so the questions are more just to like guide the discussion. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat like we mentioned. And we can always talk about those instead of, you know, the random questions we got here. But I do have a list of questions, so I might as well get started. The first one I wanted to ask is on your LinkedIn, you have a variety of positions you've done throughout your career, from firmware engineer to networking R&D to software engineer. How did you determine what you like to do in the field?
Well, I think a lot of it was just trying new things. So my background, I mean, I was always passionate about computer science and engineering from a young age. So I, grew up learning how to program. I knew from a young age that's what I wanted to do when I grew up, is something with computers, something with programming. But as I went through the college experience, early on, I was exposed to different classes. You start out with assembly, and then you learn C, and then you learn you get exposed to like databases, and you get exposed to electronics, and you have all these variety of classes, and they kind of just skim the surface to give you this foundation and exposure for something that you can explore. And what I've really learned is that as you move out into industry, as you move beyond your college experience, you'll have many opportunities to explore different things. And taking up those opportunities really helps you hone in on what you truly like. Over time, I think you naturally kind of specialize. It's just we're engineers. We're focused on very complex technical areas, and so we do naturally specialize. But the more opportunities you get to try something new, it's a beneficial thing. It'll add to your portfolio of knowledge and experience. At the same time, I've used that experience over my career just to kind of really guide what I was passionate about. So I took I ran my own business for many years, and during that time, I always would tinker with electronics and, like very low level type of programming as like a personal passion, a personal interest. And when I made the decision to go back to Sac State for my engineering degree, I knew I really wanted to focus in on this area. And that's kind of what guided me from there, is just having that passion, knowing what I want, what I liked, and taking the opportunity to go and explore that.
So this isn't on the list, but I did want to ask, do you have like a preference for like researching depth or breadth, like learning new topics versus learning more about an individual topic?
I think it's a balance. So there are times where you need to explore things from a depth perspective, and there's times where that breadth is helpful. I think when you're early in your career, that depth, taking a depth first approach is very helpful, because it allows you to build up a set of expertise. You can become an expert in something, the go-to person for something. And from that, you can look at like tangential areas or related areas and start to broaden that scope. And so naturally over, a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year type of time period, you start to build up, multiple areas of depth that span across, either different technical areas or, technical to business to, anything else. But, definitely having like a solid foundation in one area is crucial.
As students, we often don't have a perfect idea of what skills we take in class are important to the field or not. From your coursework at Sac State here, what are some of the things you used throughout your career, and what are some topics that you wished your classes focused on more?
So I'll kind of break it up into a few different answers. So one of the skills that really stands out as critical, and this will apply to any field you go into, any environment, is communication. Both written communication, verbal communication. Right now we're doing these, virtual meetings through Zoom, and we've started to embrace, video, which is something that, wasn't as common just a couple years ago. But in any type of environment, we don't work in silos. You don't work by yourself, and you're always working with other people, either on your own team within your organization or outside of your organization. And the ability to communicate effectively and exchange information is one of the key skills that you can take no matter where you go. On the flip side of that, when you ask about skills or classes, one of the things that really I found to be a great experience, and I've talked to a few students about this, is from classes where you have to do lab reports. I know that as a student, they seem very tedious and daunting. Some classes, I had a class where we would write 35, 40-page lab reports, and it seemed like a nightmare at the time. But in hindsight, and even going through the experience, you start to realize, as you're putting together that content, that information, what it is you're trying to communicate. What does that mean? So as you go through your coursework, especially those who are doing senior design, you're having to write up all this documentation. It might seem absurd. You're like, why am I having to write these things? But you're trying to convey some type of information for someone else who isn't aware of what you're doing in detail, and trying to communicate it and convey it in a way that they can understand, and in a way that changes their perception, in a way that helps justify what you're trying to do, in a way that helps garner support for an initiative. So communication, by far above everything else, is one of the most important skills. You can learn, new technical areas. You can, technology will adapt and change. That's one of the things as an engineer. It's a lifelong educational learning process. So the better you can communicate along that journey, the more successful you'll be.
Okay, so related to this first question, as like an alumni at Sac State, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned outside of classes?
I think one of the most important things that I've learned outside of class, I guess at Sac State, was building up those social connections. So participating in student organizations was one thing that was very important for me. One, as a returning student, trying to build up connections and relationships with my peers. Certainly there was an age difference, and what we might relate to on a day-to-day basis was different. But by participating in student organizations, allowed us to find that common ground, and that'll transpire, age, gender, cultural background, everything, is building those connections, building those social relationships. On top of that, through some of the friendships that I made, that's how I ended up actually at HPE Aruba. I wasn't looking for a job at Aruba at the time. I was interviewing at other places, looking at other opportunities. And I just had a friend who was in one of my classes. He and I were, on familiar terms, but we knew he's like, oh, Greg's a good student. He seems to know what he's talking about most of the time. And I just happened to go to the career fair just to say hi to him. I was like, I'm gonna go bug him. I know he's gonna be there, because he was working at HPE at the time. And, just went to go bug him, said hi. And he's like, Greg, do you have a resume? I'm like, yeah, I think I do. Yeah, pulled out a resume. And he went and he brought it to one of the hiring managers and said, you need to talk to Greg, and because of X, Y, and Z. But it just really reemphasized, those social connections and relationships that you build can open doors. The people that you meet can, vouch for you. Those networks, can help open up opportunities that you didn't realize were there and available to you.
Thank you for the question. What was your typical day? What does your typical day at HPE Aruba look like? What kind of engineering problems or challenges do you have to encounter while working there?
Yeah, so I guess I'll approach it from a couple different perspectives. Currently right now I'm a software engineering manager, which is a bit of a different role, but it's a newer role for me as well. So if I look back at my role as an engineer, or as what I call an individual contributor, the day is pretty different. More specifically, in my area, both as an engineer and even as manager now, I work in what's called a low-level software team, which as a computer engineering major or electrical engineer is like my favorite spot. It's like we write software that interacts closely with the hardware. And so the typical day as an engineer is a little bit of programming, a lot of communication, There's a lot of testing, documentation, and on top of that, going back and fixing bugs. It's the great thing about software is we can do it quickly, but by doing it quickly, we introduce defects. So there's a little bit of a mix of all of that that's in the day-to-day basis, but a lot of it falls back on communication. So we're writing code. The code that we write is going to be viewed by our peers. We go through code review processes, and so either you're helping review someone else's code, or you're communicating to them what is your code doing so that they can review it and get it to a point where it's good enough and sufficient to be able to be committed, merged, and end up in a final product at some point. As a manager, probably the key difference between my day-to-day tasks is, in addition to having the technical understanding of what my team is working on, I'm helping to enable them. And I'm still solving problems, but in a different way. So sometimes it's a matter of priority. As an engineer, you're always working with constraints and limitations, and so we're hired, and our expertise is look at all the constraints, whether they're technical, time, cost, etc., and how do we optimize what we're doing with that. So as a manager, it's not much different. It's just the types of constraints you're looking at are a little bit different, and the types of problems you're solving are just slightly different. Certainly, as an engineering manager, it's like I'm very involved in the technical aspect of things. You have to understand what the team is doing. What are the goals? What are the things that impact their deliverables, and how do you support them? So as a manager, I think there's probably a little more of a I'm not writing code. I'm not doing the code. I mean, I do help with code reviews sometimes. I'm still fortunate they let me do that. But the types of work is a little bit different. So a lot more meetings, a lot more communication occurring as you're trying to coordinate activities between multiple individuals, multiple teams, versus just kind of focused in one area.
Oh, I actually wanted to butt in because I was curious. Do you prefer your role as a manager or more of as an engineer? I know you've had experience doing both. Some people prefer to kind of stay with the hands-on, and some people do enjoy the managerial role. What's your preference?
So I mean, I can give you a different answer on any given day. I mean, certainly I'm an engineer at heart. For those of you that are in my classes, and as you talk to me, I always say I'm a proud nerd. Right now I'm in a different environment. During the day when I'm at my normal work at Aruba, I sit in a different room in my house, and behind me I have like my oscilloscopes and function generators and power supplies and all of that. So I definitely enjoy the hands-on activities of things. I like to get in and write code. And this is like, whether I'm doing it for work or personally, I like it. So transitioning from the engineering role to the management role was a big adjustment, going from something where I was, hands-on, very engaged, working on, technical designs and architecture and things that I was really passionate about. But at the same time, I realized that, as I was, even in my individual role as an engineer, I was, in a leadership position. I was helping guide other engineers. I was helping to support them. So transitioning to the management role was, kind of like a step to extend that to how can I enable more engineers to be more effective? How can I teach and guide and mentor more to get a larger overall effect? And how can I multiply my abilities and efforts? And definitely it's rewarding to see, when you can see that you've helped to enable someone else to do something, incredibly technical or creative, solve a problem that was challenging. And you can see that you've supported other people to do that, or supported multiple people to be more specific. It's very rewarding. So I do find a lot of satisfaction out of that. It's just different type of work, different type of satisfaction.
I see that. Thank you.
Okay, so So Aruba obviously is like a pretty interesting company and a big company right nearby. What advice to students would you have who are interested in like getting a position at Aruba?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, so Aruba, we have specifically here, locally to Sac State or in the Roseville area, we have our software teams, we have hardware teams, we have ASIC teams. And it's something kind of unique because we're not just like hey, here's just a pure software, pure hardware environments. We have so many opportunities in these different technical areas. So everything, from computer science to computer engineering to electrical engineering, and even to our mechanical engineers. There's opportunity locally, which is something that I didn't realize until I started looking at it when I was introduced to HP at the time many years ago. I always thought, if you want to get a technical job, you have to go to the Bay Area. If you want to work in these certain fields, you have to go to the Bay Area. And realizing that there's something more locally was very appealing. Kind of the things that stand out, and these will apply to many places. One is being able to communicate to whoever you're talking to. So you're going to go, if you're interviewing somewhere, you're going to go through different rounds of interviews. The first ones might be a quick phone screen or just chatting to figure out who you are, kind of what's your background, what experience do you have, and if everything goes well there, it could transition into longer interviews. The typical one from like a software engineering perspective is you do like programming exercises, or problem solving type of exercises. And so being able to perform well in those helps stand out. So if you're going through and looking at like solving programming problems, I know that I think on some of the discords, either through IEEE or ACM or some of the others, there are times where people are posting like, here's some programming problems. Any opportunity you can get to kind of practice, hone your skills and those types of things will make you more confident going into those types of exercises. The other aspect of it is, and this is one that's hard because I never had great grades when I was in my early college career, but grades do make a difference. And not just having good grades in your core classes, but good grades in your non-core classes. And the reason I want to really point that out is, our core classes might be like the engineering, the programming, those types of things. But our jobs aren't all just programming and engineering. There's a lot more to it. And so being able to demonstrate that you are able to perform well in a variety of situations, even situations where you might not like, hey, I didn't like literature, so I'm not going to put as much effort to it. But if you can demonstrate that you can do well in those types of environments, it speaks a lot to your overall ability and fit into an organization. And I guess one thing that you can kind of add when you're looking at, or when you're interviewing, one of the things that stands out is, if you're looking at all of your peers and everyone's going through the same set of classes, if you consider that you might have, one job opening at a place, but many, many applicants, how else do you stand out? So the types of electives that you choose could be a differentiator. The types of extracurricular activities, so student organizations, extracurricular projects can help stand out. And those give you something to really talk about when you're on an interview. Any type of project you've done in a class, the more you can talk about it and communicate, what the problem was, how did you solve that problem, and what was the, what was the impact of that problem that you solved? Definitely is a differentiator. Certainly your senior design is one of those key types of key classes where you can really take on something unique and different and give you a lot of material to talk about and demonstrate your ability to contribute in a new area.
we're in a pretty unique situation right now, given what's happening in the world, the whole COVID situation, and I'm sure you've probably been through pretty rough times with 2008, 2009, financial crisis. If you have any advice to students currently in Sac State who are going through the job market, what would you give?
I think above everything, persevere, don't give up, don't get discouraged. And this is something that I've learned, as a business owner for many years. When I was a business owner, you know, everything I did, would make or break me. Every customer encounter could either, help pay the bills that month, or could cause us to struggle. And you have to go out and take risks. So part of that is, going out and getting outside of your comfort zone, learning how to, for example, one of the big things for me is I'm a very introverted, shy person. Most people question me when they say that. They say, Greg, that doesn't sound like you. But if I walk into a group of people, my heart's racing, I'm panicking. But learning how to overcome that and speak in public was a big deal for me. And that was a big risk. I had this fear, oh, what if I say something wrong? And I've learned that for the most part, most people aren't going to care if I say something wrong. Most of the time, most people are just as afraid to speak up as I was. But it just reemphasizes, take risks, get out of your comfort zone a little bit, persevere. I can't tell you how many times I would walk into meetings to meet with customers, potential customers, I should say. And they're like, no, not interested, or, just it's not going to work out. And, it's hard, to hear no all the time or get rejected. You feel discouraged, but persevere and, turn each no into a learning experience. Okay, why did they say no? Why did it not work out? What can I say next time to do something better? What can I do different? How can I learn from the experience I've gone through? And you can even apply that in your classes. When you have an assignment, you didn't do so well on it. Well, why did I not do so well on it? What can I change and improve upon next time? I say this as a professor, and I've encouraged my students always, reach out for help. It's okay to ask for help and ask for guidance. Whether it's from a peer, from a mentor. The worst that can happen by reaching out to someone is they might say no. But then you reach out again, and eventually someone will say yes. So as you're looking for jobs, I know right now the industry, the market is been a tumultuous place. Keep your hopes up, keep your heads held high. Don't give up. Certainly for those of you that are participating in IEEE, you're doing something more than the students that aren't. And so you have a leg up. You're doing something different, and you're getting experience that other students wouldn't get. And you're building a network that might help open doors, maybe not right now, but over a period of time.
Tangentially related, what was you mentioned that you owned a business, like you were a CEO of your own business. What was that experience like?
It was definitely an experience that I am extremely lucky that I had. I learned so much more about myself and about the world and about even technology than I thought I would. It forced, like I said, it forced me to venture out into areas that I wasn't comfortable with all the time. It forced me to take risks. It forced me to work very hard and be very focused at times on, what the end goal was. It didn't come out with it came with hardships at times. But those hardships I felt, really allowed me to focus on what was important. One of the key things, when I went back to Sac State to finish my engineering degree, really a large part of that was, going through the experience of having my business, where I was working in a, higher level application software, which I realized I wasn't as passionate about that area. I was really passionate about this low level, close to the hardware. And so going back and having that experience, that kind of perspective was very valuable. And I think no matter what experience you go through, anything you can do something new or different gives you perspective that will influence, future decisions and future endeavors.
Thank you. Oftentimes during like an interview process, companies will ask, interviewees, students about various leadership qualities or leadership experiences. And obviously as like, a manager, you have that now. What was that like experience like for you, and what was some like leadership advice you'd give in general?
Yeah, so I think that's it's one of those things that doesn't seem obvious to right off the bat. Why would you ask about leadership? And I think the key thing about that is, in everything we're doing, we're interacting with other people, and you have to learn to, or I guess to be an effective engineer, to be an effective business person, effective in any environment. A large part of being effective is influencing other people to buy into your ideas, to buy into what you're doing. So whether it's like on a business side of it, convincing someone or demonstrating, the value that you add by with whatever product. If you're an engineer, you might have a problem you're trying to solve, and there's, might be 10 different right ways to do it, but why should your way be the one that's chosen? What's the most efficient way to do it? And so where leadership comes into is by being able to demonstrate leadership, you're able to demonstrate that you are able to communicate, because you can't, someone who can't communicate can't lead effectively. You're able to demonstrate that you can get others to buy into your ideas. You're able to demonstrate, probably more importantly above everything, is that you can support those that you're leading. I think there's a misconception between like a manager is like the boss, and everyone who works under the manager is, they just work for the boss. I think the key thing is that, it's truly, you're leading a team, and you're nothing without your team. And so if you can inspire a team, whether it's another person, just one other person, or 10 people or 100 people, if you can inspire those people and other individuals to do their best, it says a lot about, I guess, your ability to communicate, your ability to, be creative, to ability to support others. It's all around, I think it's a good set of experience that you can bring in. Now, I guess other part of the question is, you ask about advice I could give. One of the key things is, you have this, student organization, the IEEE. And so for some of you, you already have taken a leadership position. And whether it's, president or secretary or, industry liaison, each of those roles requires different, sets of leadership qualities, organization, and communication, etc. So whenever you have an opportunity that pops up, take it, take that risk, step up. Sometimes the fact that you step up will inspire someone else to want to step up down the road. And that's a characteristic of leadership right there, is to help, take that initial step, and others will follow. When you have opportunities to volunteer, that's another form of leadership, when you're taking initiative on something. And certainly, if you're working on group projects, there will be times where you might be in a leadership position, even though it's not formally defined as you're a leader. But it's going to be constant negotiation. If you have 3 people working on something, there's going to be 3 different ideas of how that should be approached. So how do you help influence that? How do you help your partners, your peers, come to that common goal? And so those types of experiences are things you can talk about from a leadership perspective. Is what are the kind of like more formal things? I was vice president of IEEE, or I was secretary from ACM. Those are like maybe formal roles that you can talk about. But even in the ones that aren't like clearly defined, hey, I took leadership initiative in this team project, and I helped guide the team for this one, this one piece of the project. I took the lead on it, and we guided it through to completion. We met our schedule. We were, we allocated $300 in parts, but we came in at, 280. Or, hey, we allocated $300 for parts, but we came in at 500, and we learned this, this, this. So that any type of thing where you can kind of demonstrate that ability to take control of a situation, I would encourage it.
Okay. Well, I guess two, because there's one question that the chat, like our IEEE officers chat wanted to ask. But before that, you recently started lecturing here at Sac State, right? Last semester you took over the spot during the middle of the whole COVID academic. What made you decide on teaching here? Do you enjoy teaching here? I hope you do. And what was it like to start teaching here in a unique time?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of go back, very, very far back. When I first went to college, this was back in the late 90s. So my bald head now makes sense. My first semester there, I went, did my classes, I did well on a couple of them. And my second semester, I was asked, I don't remember who asked me, but maybe someone suggested, hey, oh, you should go tutor some classes. I guess I ran into someone that they knew that they needed people to help tutor computer science classes. And so I started tutoring computer science classes at the junior college. And through that experience, I really realized I gained a lot of satisfaction out of helping other people. I can distinctly remember, I guess like an introduction to computers class. This was like literally like, this is how you double click. And I had students in that class that were, elderly people that were going back to learn how to use computers. And just kind of seeing like that transformation of like, not knowing how to do something to learning it and then being able to apply it. And you could see like the light bulb click off, or you could see the excitement in those individuals. It was very rewarding. I was like, oh, I'm making an impact in someone's life. When I carried that through, when I came back to Sac State in 2013, I know my first semester back, I was, a nervous wreck. Like just, can I get into the classes I need to get in? I haven't looked at my differential equations for 8 years, and I need to go start doing this in my electronics classes. It was a lot of stress. And I reached out to professors. I reached out and I took up, tutoring opportunities. I remember I took an economics 1B class as a requirement, and then they offered like this extra tutoring session. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go join it, because anything that'll force me to study and allocate time towards it, and any extra help I can get will be advantageous. But during some of those experiences, whether it's going to lab sessions or going to the tutoring sessions and seeing other students there, I realized that there are times I knew something that they didn't, and vice versa, and I could impart, some of my knowledge and experience and help guide them along. And every semester beyond that, anytime that I had an opportunity to help another student learn something, one, it helped me reinforce that I really knew what the material was. But then seeing that, another student would learn something and help them grow, had a lot of satisfaction. When I graduated, I was asked by the department a couple times, many times, like, hey, would you be able to interested in teaching a lab? Would you be interested in teaching a class? And for many years, like the schedule never worked out. It's just, there's something lined up or something going on that just the timing wasn't right. But that passion for teaching never is left. So in the spring, when I got a call from the department, a couple of emails sent my way, and the opportunity came up, and look at the situation where, okay, there's a need from it. Yes, the university needs help. The students are in a situation where they're mid-semester and not knowing what to do. I took it as like, this is like a call for me to help teach, and the timing worked out. It's kind of like the perfect storm of everything. compounded with the fact that it was one of my favorite classes that I took. So it's like, how can I say no? So I absolutely love teaching. I feel truly honored to be at Sac State. I mentioned, there's so many other professors at Sac State that have a wealth of experience and knowledge. And just to even say I'm part of that group is very rewarding and very much an honor. And on top of everything, when I see students that are learning something new, and you can see it's hard right now in the virtual environment because unlike the IEEE meeting right here, where I see people on camera, in my classes I don't have that same luxury. So I don't get to see like the light bulbs going off because it's something you can visibly see when someone says, "Oh, I get it now. It makes sense." Or when someone's not getting something, and you can realize, "Oh, can let me help explain a different way so that you can help understand." Being able to see that impact is very rewarding, and I absolutely, like I said, I absolutely love teaching. I love sharing and mentoring and guiding. So even participating in this chat here is very rewarding for me.
That is a note for me to keep my camera on during lectures.
Yeah,
I'll do that.
and just to reemphasize, I don't require it. Sac State doesn't require it. I always encourage, if you want to, you're more than welcome, but it's definitely not a requirement. I don't want anyone to ever feel uncomfortable. Even at work, I have team members that they aren't as inclined to use their cameras. And when we went from a in-person environment to a virtual remote environment, I said right away, like, I'm turning on my cameras. I will always be on camera in a meeting. You don't have to. And I definitely respect everyone's position on that. So.
And
also
go ahead.
No, sorry.
No,
So you
no.
mentioned earlier that you worked in an environment where you worked on high-level applications, and then realized that you prefer the low-level working environment. Do you have any or recommend any resources or maybe advice for students to help arrive to a conclusion of what specific engineering field they want to take on? Because there's just so many different things that they can go into, especially during a time like this where they might not be able to gain industry experience to figure that out.
Yeah, so I think when you look at your undergrad experience, and I guess I'm speaking to undergrads first. If there are any grad students, I'll have something slightly different to say. But when you're looking at your undergrad experience, the biggest thing is you're exposed to like just a small sliver of different areas. So if you take a class like IEEE 108, you're learning a little bit about electronics there. You take a class like 151, you're learning a little bit about CMOS and VLSI. You take a class like 187, you're going to dive into more like these embedded systems. There's computer science classes where you can learn about compilers and different things, system architecture. But the experience as an undergrad is you're exposed to just like, you're exposed to like all these different things. And it may not be clear like what is it you truly like. I think if you have the opportunity, this is one of those things where if you have an opportunity to go on to grad school, that's the time where you're going to spend more time kind of specializing. But if you're not sure exactly what you want to specialize in, it's okay to like, try something out and take a risk. Taking it, if you have an opportunity to take an internship somewhere, getting an internship will give you some insight and experience, because then you'll start to see what happens on a day-to-day basis. You may be all gung-ho about, hey, I love ASIC design. I want to work on ASICs. And you might say that based upon the work you did in like CP 142 or in the VLSI class. And then you get in the real world and you realize, okay, I'm not going to be writing, designing these blocks on the ASIC, because there's going to be an engineer that has 25 years of experience that's doing that. And my job is going to be, a lot of testing, a lot of validation, and there might be some design that will come over time. Same thing on the software side. You'll realize, oh, I love programming this one environment, or I love like, writing, little like, web apps or, little phone apps. And then you realize, okay, well, what actually goes into developing something at scale or developing something that you take to market? And it's very different. So if you have an opportunity to get an internship, that can help shed some light. and don't be afraid to try something out. And if you are in an environment that you're like, you know what, I don't really like this as much, don't be afraid to look for other opportunities and try something else out as well. I guess, and the flip side of that is like, don't hop from somewhere to place like too quickly, because that can harm you in the long run. But don't be afraid if you've tried something out, and give it some period of time to try it, and then say, no, I've tried it. I think I want to try something else. Don't be afraid.
What would you think is like a reasonable length of time? I've heard usually you should stay at your job for at least a year, but I've also heard like you really don't you're not really productive until like 2 years into any given position. So
yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance, and it's hard to say there's no true right or wrong. I definitely feel that you need a sufficient amount of time where you're self-sufficient to be able to make a determination. So if you're at an organization that you're there for 8 months, you're still learning a lot, and you're going to learn a lot over the first 2 or 3 years at a place. At the same time, if you're miserable, like 6 months in, you're like, I can't stand this place. Like my manager with a beard and a bald head is just wacky, and I can't stand him. Don't don't hold yourself to like, oh, I have to stay here forever. And this is one of those things where this is more of like a personal advice versus professional side of things. But you have to balance out your personal interests versus your professional. And anytime that your personal interests and your professional overlap, it's like that's probably one of those most amazing experiences. I think that the longer you're in any given role, there'll be a certain point where you're going to always like ramp up and you're going to plateau. And I think whenever you're at that plateau is where you want to look at, okay, well, what can I do? How can I improve? And this is just a personal philosophy on like continual improvement. So there's a phrase, and I'm gonna totally butcher it. Actually, I'm not going to try it because now I've put a lot of pressure on me. But it's about you can do something well to a certain point, but then once you've kind of done something well, how do you make that better? And once you've done something better, how do you make that the best? And it's just that continual process. So when you're at an organization and you've kind of hit that plateau, that's a time where you can look at how do I grow as an individual? How do I grow as an engineer? And whether that's within an organization or even externally, that's always like a reasonable thing to look at.
So Sean, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I just wanted to butt in because when you mentioned working in like 142 and then thinking I want to work in ASIC. So I actually interned at Aruba this summer in ASIC. It was kind of like the opposite for me. When the hiring manager for the ASIC department reached out to me, I was like, oh, like I didn't really even apply for this position. My resume just kind of floated around. But then I learned about ASIC while I was in it, and I kind of learned the different fields and how it interacts with different departments. But I guess more speaking on sometimes when you get into a position in a company and you're not satisfied with what you're doing, a lot of companies, they have the opportunity to kind of go into different fields. Like, for example, even Aruba, they've got offices like everywhere in the US, not just in Palo Alto and here, but they even have a small team in Colorado. And each team kind of does different things. And from what I've heard anyway, they're very flexible about kind of putting you where your skills fit best. And then it's just a matter of you kind of reaching out and making that initiative to, make a change, basically.
Yeah, I'll add it to that. I'm trying to be careful not to be on the HPE Aruba train here and make this like a promotional thing. But that's one of the qualities with HPE Aruba that, or HP at the time, but HPE and Aruba now, for at least my business unit, has really really stood out for me. And as an organization, they really want to take care of their team members, and part of that is realizing over time, like your interests will change. You're going to grow in different ways. And, sometimes you're not going to want to do the same thing. You're not going to want to do the same thing day in and day out forever. Some people might, some people might not. So having an organization that supports you on career advancement, and whether it's like a vertical promotion or a lateral transition to like a different area, different business unit, an organization that supports you is the best thing you could ask for. And like Sabina had mentioned, at HPE and Aruba, it's clearly demonstrated that the organization provides those type of opportunities. I primarily worked in low-level software. At a certain point, I said, hey, I want to take a venture off and learn a little bit more about a different area. And I spent some time over in layer 2 networking for a little bit, and before I made my way back to low level, which is where my passion was. So it's just one of those things where like just in a few years, like I was able to go out and try different things, and the organization and the people there supported it. And so definitely, if you are interviewing at a place, that's like a quality that you'd want to ask, like what does career advancement look like, both from like a vertical step up, but also the ability to make lateral transitions to different areas.
So we had a question in the chat on the kind of low level stuff you've done. What architectures have you used the most? x86, MIPS, RISC-V, whatever. And I wanted to add to that, like in general, what is like low level like work kind of like versus like higher level? We get a little bit of low level experience through like 142, 159, right? But we really don't have that much of experience in that kind of stuff. So like, what kind of things do you do in low level? And
yeah, so I think architecture-wise, if you're looking, to specialize in an architecture, there's kind of like two that really stand out that'll, carry you anywhere in the industry. One is x86. You can't go wrong with it. It's everywhere. Other would be ARM. And if you look at like your mobile devices, nearly every cell phone out there has some sort of ARM CPU in it, on top of like other types of embedded devices out there. That said, if you are familiar with one type of architecture and one type of instruction set, if you're working at that level, typically picking up another one is not a huge leap. There is to a certain degree, like if you're going to go and start writing like very detailed, or doing a lot of like detailed like kernel area type of work, or bringing up hardware, you want to be familiar with it. But I think that the most important thing, this is kind of like translates into that low level aspect of it, is that low level software is an area where you're working close to the hardware, and that's something where you kind of don't take the hardware for granted. And whether it's an ARM CPU, an Intel x86 CPU, or an AMD x86 CPU, or let's extend it further, look like an NVIDIA or AMD GPU, the ability to understand what the hardware is doing and how it's doing it and why it's doing it is critically important. So if you've gone through classes like your 108 class, when I took it, we would look at data sheets. I guess 117 and 108. You look a lot of data sheets for different components, or data sheets for transistors, and being able to understand like, hey, what's happening? How does this part work? What are the characteristics? And so with low-level software, it's you're trying to understand, okay, how does the underlying hardware work? And I contrast that with like upper layer software, where you might be working like some sort of cloud system, and kind of like it's like, okay, well, we need to add more CPUs or more memory or more storage. It's like, okay, you can click a couple buttons hypothetically, and you provision those things. Low level, you're a lot more constrained. You have to consider those aspects a little bit differently. And certainly, I don't want to discount at a higher level. When you're operating at scale, you don't want to take things for granted as well. But typically, the emphasis on certain areas is a little bit different.
Does anyone have any questions?
So I'll just butt in. I don't know if you recall working at Aruba with a guy named Sean Kennedy.
Yeah.
You do? Okay. So he's our IEEE ghost advisor, I guess you could say. He's still around in our Discord. He comes out. Anyways, he had a question that he wanted to ask you. I think Kevin has it.
Well, I'll preface something real quick. So Sean and I are friends. I consider Sean to be a good friend of mine. He and I were senior design partners, went through college together, and every semester he was one of the individuals that would email me and say, "Greg, can you teach a class?" And so I was wondering if I'd see him pop up on here, but now that I know he's around, he's going to ask a tough question, I bet.
It's not.
We didn't understand exactly the nature of your guys' relationship because he's been very mysterious about it, but he's like, yeah, I know him. I'm like, okay. But, the question that he asked actually was
Very complicated.
super difficult, and totally get it if you can't answer it. He said, ask him Hufflepuff, Slytherin, Gryffindor, or Ravenclaw. He knows the right answer. Assuming you're a big Harry Potter fan.
I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but I wonder if he's asking, you know, if I recall his school, but I have totally blanked now.
I'm sure he's gonna watch this recording and be like,
He's gonna. I'll get a text a little later, and he's like, "Greg, you're dead to me now." And so you guys, I know that Sean has been active with IEEE with the student group a lot more actively than I have over the years, and so you're definitely lucky to have him help oversee and help you out.
yeah, he's awesome, gives great advice, and it's like the omnipresent.
Yeah. I kind of you mentioned it, so I did want to ask your senior project. I remember like from talking to Sean, it was some like VR headset thing. What was that, and what was it like doing that?
So we had a lot of ambition, and this is one of those things where I said take risks because you'll learn a lot from it. So we had the idea that we wanted to create a VR headset for like remote control. So like think about, I think one of the examples we did when we were trying to pitch it to our advisor or senior project advisor was, think about you have like some remote environment and you're typically walking in there with like a robot and you have just like a monitor, and like the typical thing, you have like a monitor with like a 2D display. And so like, well, you lose a lot of like depth, you lose a lot of perspective from that 2D monitor. Yeah, you can see certain things, but it's different than if you can see it like 3D. We can like look around and see. So we said, we're going to make a VR headset that, you could basically hypothetically have remote control. But we took it a step further. We're like, we're going to use FPGAs and we're going to develop our own little boards and develop all these things, and took on a lot more than we probably should have. But it was one of the most rewarding experiences because it wasn't easy. We encountered a lot of problems. And there's those problems that really taught us, how to solve things, how to learn from things. One of the problems I recall specifically at one point was we had these high speed transmission lines that, for the FPGA. And we're like, well, we need to develop a board. Like, well, how do we test this? And it's like, well, we want to test certain things out. And what we found out, well, Sac State didn't have equipment at the time that allow us to test the electrical characteristics of these high-speed transmission lines. We're like, well, what do we do now? How do we work around this? How do we adapt and modify our project to try to get towards a solution? I will say publicly, and I have no shame in saying it, it did not work out as we expected. We didn't get to the result that we wanted in the end, but we learned a tremendous amount along the way. And I still talk about that project to individuals about all the things I learned. And that's, one of those things where I talk about taking risks or doing something that you might not, be comfortable with, is any experience you go through that you can learn from gives you something to talk about and an experience to talk about. So don't be afraid of failure. You'll hear a lot of successful people tell you the same thing. Like, you hear like but it'll fly going by. So hear like different entrepreneurs say, oh yeah, like, don't be afraid to fail or anything. And it's hard sometimes because you see like them as like, being successful, they make it look easy. And you don't hear the failure stories very often. You hear the success stories. But every failure is, or every shortcoming is an educational experience, an opportunity to learn.
Agreed. Well, yeah, it's 8 p.m., so I don't want to take too much time out of everyone's night here, but the meeting is recorded. So I'll go ahead and have that posted on Discord somehow for those who weren't able to make it. But other than that, thank you, Greg, so much for coming out. I know you said you had a long day, so we appreciate you making the sacrifice here to be with us.
It's my pleasure.
Definitely informative, and I love the responses to the questions. So I'm glad.
Yeah, no, yeah,
it's us as students.
Yeah, it's not every day that you kind of get to sit down and talk with someone from industry casually. I feel like every time people have these meetings, it's more of like, let's advertise the company versus kind of getting to know, I guess, industry experience on a more intimate level. So thank you for that. I'm sure everyone's going to find that very informative and helpful.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to come and speak. Like I said, for me, this is kind of like a passion. So even though I know it's been a long day for me, it's energizing and exciting to be able to come and talk to everyone. And for those that do have questions, I mean, I'm always, I try to be as approachable as I can. Don't hesitate to reach out. Send me an email or send me a message, and I'd be glad to chat and everything.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and end the meeting here. All right, thank you everyone for coming out, and have a good rest of your night then.